questioning is perhaps the greatest gift we have as human beings.
Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking.
It's a way of thinking that teaches us to question everything we think we know.
Science came about by developing techniques, methodologies for gaining reliable knowledge about the world.
We have at our fingertips the technologies that were only possible for the largest governments and corporations 20 years ago as an individual today.
If the human civilization continued at anything remotely like the current pace of technology advancement for 1 million years, where would we be? I think we're either extinct or on a lot of planets.
The good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe in it.
We hold the scientific method in high regard because it works. If it stopped working, we'd throw it out.
Discover the past.
Create the future.
This is the Here and How podcast.
Welcome to the Here and How podcast, where every week we dive deep into big ideas to explore the past and create a brighter future. This is episode 16, What Killed the Dinosaurs? I'm Stephen Woodford, also known as Rationality Rules, and with me is the tremendous Thomas Westbrook, also known as Holy Kool-Aid, and the radiant Rachel Oates, also known as Kyra's mum. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
As just saying, we do have to get Kyra in the episodes, or at least in one of them. She deserves a little bit of fame. For anyone that doesn't know, Kyra is Rachel's dog.
She's more than my dog. She's my daughter.
Sorry, daughter. Sorry.
Kyra doesn't really even need her own Instagram because she's kind of hijacked Rachel's.
That's true.
Very true.
I'm going to give her her own Instagram. That way I don't have to post her all the time, you know, and I still do. Anyway, I think I take too many pictures of her.
Nah.
Actually, that's not possible. I just take a lot.
Rachel,
she's worth it. She's really cute.
If Kyra was a chicken, you would technically be taking pictures of a dinosaur.
Yeah, you would.
You guys love that transition?
Mm-hmm.
That was
good.
What
I don't understand.
Okay, let's start with what is a dinosaur.
Yeah, this is my question, because I always thought birds are like descendants of dinosaurs, but now everyone's always like, no, birds are dinosaurs. And I'm like, so in that case, what is a dinosaur?
Take it away, Thomas.
Oh, God. I thought you were leading this episode. I just know that dinosaurs have feathers. There was a recent discovery where they found, you know, multiple dinosaur fossils that have not the fossils themselves, but the surrounding rock that where they find the imprints and stuff, where there are feather imprints. But then they also recently found like a very small dinosaur tail
wasn't it like preserved in amber?
Yeah, in amber.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really cool.
They actually have like a remnant of a dinosaur, which is kind of cool.
To answer the question a little bit more directly, I think what it is that it's to do with the way in which animals are and plants, organisms are given their clade, family, etc. Once you're a part of a certain clade, you're always part of that clade. So you are a human, but you are also a mammal. You can't evolve to a point where you're no longer a mammal. I mean, you could kind of violate the definition, but you're always going to be a mammal. Same is true of dinosaur. Like, we look at dinosaur to be quite specific, even though it's a very big array of different species. So the fact that some of the dinosaurs survived and evidently are birds today, birds are still dinosaurs. Okay. So that's kind of how that works.
This does make a lot of sense.
It's similar to how, I think it's PC Myers has correctly said that humans are fish, because fish also fits that kind of category.
It's kind of like how a tree can have branches that go off in all directions, but they all kind of go back. Like when you trace them backwards, they're still higher up classifications. You can't separate from that. You can't all of a sudden be in a different tree.
I think that's where the confusion was for me, because, like, you know, when you picture, like, they do call it like a tree of sort of life, don't they? When I picture that in my head, like, there's a kind of different offshoot for dinosaurs throughout birds, and like in my mind they just have this common ancestor. But you guys are right, like if birds are like the descendants of some dinosaurs, then of course they were on the same branch to begin with. So that you guys are right, and it does make sense.
But I know why it's unintuitive, because I remember the first time somebody called me a fish, I thought, what are you doing with that word? Because that is a bit weird, but it does fall into that. So this week, as we're already starting to tap into, we're going into the fascinating topic of mass extinction. And so here's a first question for you. What exactly is a mass extinction?
it's when like a large percentage of a population dies, right? So like it could be like it's not just one species dying. There's like lots and lots of them.
So would that mean that two or more would count as a mass extinction?
I would say a time period where 50% or more of living organisms on Earth die.
I think it's got to be a high percentage. I just don't know what the percentage would be. I'd say close to like 80%, but that's probably silly.
Well, it's very interesting. Part of why I wanted to ask you both that is because it's not really a question that's asked at all. I couldn't find any answer. It's pretty much arbitrary. Yeah, it's essentially when you have the termination of a large number of species within a short period. It seems to be vague. Maybe there is some definitions, and if anyone listening does know one that is used by paleontologists, etc., then let us know. It would be good.
Well, I want to point out that short period refers to short in terms of like massive timescale. So when you're thinking of the Earth being over 4 billion years old, a short time frame is tens of thousands of years. So you might be looking at
not just one afternoon.
Yeah, it's not just like all of a sudden overnight all these animals are gone, but it might be a kind of slow, gradual process, whether it's through climate change or whether it's through volcanic activity or something else that causes over a period of 10,000 years for a massive shift in ecosystems that wipe out.
Yeah,
I saw one classification that was saying 50% or more. I don't know if that's accurate, but it seems about right to me.
It seems a fair way to put it. I mean, 50%. That is huge. That is an enormous amount of species being eradicated. And actually, we're going to tap into that now. So originally, I wanted to be able to take on all of the extinctions and talk about the evidence, but that became a very, very heavy episode. And so I didn't want to do that. One, because it just took too much time and I don't have the brain to retain all of this. But the second question I have is, how many mass extinctions have there been, and can you name them?
5 and no.
Yep, fair play.
6 if you count the current one.
That's interesting. It is an interesting one, because there is a good argument to say that there is one happening. It would be called the Holocene, I believe, the Holocene extinction, and it's happening right now. But we'll dive more into that later if you're cool with that, guys.
As far as the names of them, I know there's I looked earlier, and I'm trying not to look right now so I don't cheat. But I know there's
no looking now.
The largest one was the Permian extinction.
Okay.
And it killed, I think it was like 96% of everything on Earth.
Yeah,
so that one almost wiped out life entirely.
96% is very hard to fathom what a world looks like if you take away 96% of all species. It's insane. But yeah, that's just.
And then there was the was it the Jurassic-Triassic extinction or Triassic-Jurassic? I forget the.
Yep.
And then there's the late Devonian extinction. And then the current one you said was the Holocene. I don't remember the other two off the top of my head. There's the one that killed the dinosaurs. What was that one called?
It's kind of changed its name as well.
Okay. Ooh. I'm cheating now. But
no.
It the Cretaceous Tertiary?
Yes, but I don't know if that's how you pronounce the second word. But I have it down somewhere. Unless you're sure it's pronounced that way, and then yes, that is what it is. But to just quickly burst through them, you have the Ordovician Silurian events, which is dated to about 450 to 440 million years ago, and it was caused by one or more of the following, which is glaciation, a gamma ray burst, which kind of relates to something you've said in previous episodes. Didn't realize just how powerful those can be if you get hit by one. Volcanism and metal poisoning.
And by volcanism, you mean volcanoes, not like the Star Trek Vulcans invading.
Yeah. Volcanoism, we could say, but absolutely. Can you guys guess what % of species got wiped out by that one? It's the first mass extinction.
I used to know this. This was quite a big one, wasn't it, I think?
Ooh, was it?
This was the saddest one because it killed all the trilobites.
It did. It's like goodbye trilobite. It's a very, very, very successful species which came with the Cambrian explosion. If I remember correctly.
I'm gonna guess that it wiped out 58%.
I'm gonna go with 80.
Okie dokie. You're closer, Rachel. It was 70%. So it took out 70% of species, 57% of all genera, and 27% of all families. So again,
that is so much.
Absolutely devastating. I can't go into too much details into these because I actually haven't done the adequate research. But I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, 70%.
Can I ask a potentially stupid question?
Of course you can. Always.
Thank you. I'm full of them. But when we talk about like mass extinctions and stuff, you've mentioned like the percentage of species that it wipes out. But is there any specification that it has to be like spread across different families? Like if, say, you know, a bunch of mammals got wiped out, like say let's say all the mammals got wiped out, but everything else survived, would that still be a mass extinction? Or does it have to be some fungi, some animals, some plants, or like what's the criteria? Does it have to be across species, across genuses, across families? Like,
it's a good question.
I think it's percentage of all life, but I don't know that if you have a massive cataclysmic event that wipes out 90% of all mammals, I think it'd be really rare that wouldn't affect other species as well. Because
but you could have the introduction of some kind of disease, and it affects mammals, or it affects certain mammals, and it wipes them out, and that would look very peculiar in the fossil record, because you'd think, well, there's no signs of events happening, and yet all of a sudden all of these died. Was that competition? Maybe. Or was it there was a disease, a black plague of the Cretaceous period or whatnot that just wiped it out? It's very hard to detect these things. So
I feel like diseases, though, tend to be more like, there are some diseases that cross interspecies boundaries, but if it's because even mammals alone, that's such a diverse, massive classification.
It is.
If you had a disease that was able to infect 90% of all mammals, that disease is probably resilient enough to wipe out all the birds and other animals as well. Because, there's a lot of diseases that you can get that you can't pass to dogs, or that you can't transmit to pigs or something.
Yeah, there is.
I think it depends, because what if, say, for example, it affected the mammal's ability to reproduce? That wouldn't necessarily affect birds or fish, It would probably just affect mammals.
Yeah, but I think it's unlikely, but I think there could be diseases that really would just apply to mammals in a sense. But we know there's things like that. There's diseases that only affect apes. That's that family can get affected, but nothing else will, and it would look very strange in the fossil record. But yeah, it's something you can tell about these extinctions is that if the extinction of species is high and the extinction of families is low, that tends to tell you that the extinction had worse effects in certain environments. Whereas if they're both high, which was the case with the previous, it's telling you that it affected the water, the land, and just about everything. So you can kind of gather you can gather more information about what got affected, and that will be a bit of evidence that you can use to come up with a hypothesis and at a certain point a theory as to why it happened. So the next is what you said, the Permian Triassic event, which is 252 million years ago, and it was caused by one or more of the following, which was asteroid impact, volcanism. I am saying that right, I assume, because I don't want people going, you have said that wrong.
I think so.
No, I think that's right.
I'm rolling with it anyway. It's a new thing. I'm going to get this one wrong. Methanogenic microbes, increased anoxia, which means a deficiency in oxygen, and /or aridity, which means a lack of water. So again, what percent do you think was taken out by this bad boy?
Which one? You said late Devonian?
Permian Triassic.
Oh, the Permian.
Yep.
Okay, although the Permian's the one I mentioned earlier. That one was like 96%.
Yep. Yeah, you got it. I was hoping you would just forget the term and go past it. But yeah, 83% of all genera.
I just know that one because it's the big one.
Yeah, no, it's huge as well. Like 83% of all genera and 57% of all families. So you know that was some serious damage. The Triassic-Jurassic event, which was 201 million years ago, was caused by one or more of climate change, asteroid impact, and/or volcanism again. This one resulted in 70% of all species, 48% of all genera, and 23% of all families. And then we come to where our beloved dinosaurs, or at least most of them, as we've already tapped into, died. And that's the Cretaceous Paleogene event. So it happened 66 million years ago, and it was caused by one or more of the following: asteroid impact, volcanism, biological competition, and/or continental drift. Do you know what percent this one took out?
I'd say lower, like maybe like 60.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 61.
It's between 70 and 75%.
I
so
win.
Yeah, you do. That's 1-1. It is. It was a huge event, and again, it killed 50% of all genera and 17% of all families. So
all of the dinosaurs except for the little mosquito that had the blood in the amber in Jurassic Park.
Yeah, exactly. Now, for this conversation, we're going to focus on the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction, which is also known as the Cretaceous, I want to say this right, Tertiary. Is that right?
Sure.
We're going to roll with it, yeah?
I'm sure that
I think it is then.
British pronunciations are always different from American ones, so you can get away with it.
You know, I can get away with it. I have noticed this, but once in a while, it's so wrong, and I'm just like, well, I can't even blame my dyslexia for this. So
I mean, if you called it something like Tertiary, I'd probably call you out.
You go, come on, man. Yeah, do better than that. So yeah, the KT extinction. I'm going to do that from now on. That makes me remain cool. And so the big question
just don't start saying Z.
No, I will not be saying Z.
XYZ.
Like XYZ.
No, it's a Z when it's on its own.
Yeah, it is a Z on its own. Yeah.
Oh, you Brits.
Oh, Americans. So I was going to ask you which big and scary array of species did this mass extinction obliterate, but
was it pigs?
Flying pigs and giant chickens.
Oh no, I would love to have seen them.
Giant chickens, we'll go for that. The giant chicken that was the Tyrannosaurus, that did die then and there. But as you've already tapped into, dinosaurs didn't die. They still exist because birds are dinosaurs. And we've known this, or the evidence we've had for this is predominantly morphological. So there's a lot of similarities. And then, of course, we've more recently, over the last decade or so, found evidence of feathers. And we've managed to get a DNA analysis from a collagen found in an 80 million year old mineral of a dinosaur, and it's very, very close to a turkey. So it's pretty much ironclad. Yeah, I know, it's really, really crazy. It's, you know, some of the things you think, how did they get that DNA? This is insane. And the stories are really quite, you couldn't make them up if you wanted to. Some of them is a mosquito took some blood and then flew into amber, and they find the amber and they can get to the thing, and yeah, there's
Is that actually a thing with dinosaurs, or is that just the plot of Jurassic Park?
That's the plot of Jurassic Park, but there is things like that, which...
I know they found like the dinosaur tail in amber.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Can you sequence DNA from that far back? Like I know that, you know, with like carbon dating, you know, most elements have, you know, half-lives that I feel like after a certain point that DNA would just be so, you know,
I feel
corrupted.
As long as, like,
I say corrupted as a you know, with my background in like IT, I think of like hard drives and data and stuff. But I mean, I feel like it breaks down after a while.
Well, I think you'd need it to be exposed to something like extreme heat for it to be, you know, corrupted and for it to break down.
Well, but even light, you know, radiation from the sun and stuff.
Yeah. Well,
unless it's buried.
If it's in amber and it's buried, then yeah, I don't see why. What it would really be exposed to.
Doesn't it just decay though? Don't you just have genetic decay over time?
I don't think so.
It's a good question. And I don't know the answer to it.
Our listeners, we'll have them weigh in. We'll have a section next week, listener mail.
You know, because we were speaking about the decay of minerals, etc., and isotopes. I guess it stands to reason that biological content would do the same. But yeah, that's an interesting.
True.
I'm gonna have to research it, and I will, because that is an interesting avenue to dive down. So let's start with the hypotheses proposed for its cause, starting with the volcanism hypothesis, which is otherwise known as the Deacon Traps theory. In short, the Deacon Traps, which is one of the largest volcanic features on Earth, I believe they're located in India. They emerged 66.25 million years ago, which, as you know, lines up quite well with the date of the extinction. So, according to this theory, their emergence would have proved to be a slow but sure catastrophe, and they would have likely, and almost certainly did, pump enormous quantities of gas and dust into the atmosphere, which of course would have blocked the sun's rays and thus caused a reduction in temperature, plant life, and in turn all species higher on the food chain. So that is one of the biggest hypotheses / theories given for that extinction. I was wondering, do you guys know of any evidence that would support this, other than, of course, the Deacon Traps existing and dating back to exactly that time?
I imagine if we look at the, I guess around where the volcano is, we'd be able to see things like how much magma or lava was like spewed out at the time, to get an idea of how big the explosion was and how long it went on for by looking at kind of like the cooling patterns. And then from that we could get an idea of like how much dust and gas it spewed out, to get an idea of how the like temperature of the planet was affected as a whole.
Yeah, bang on.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that, yeah, go on.
I was gonna ask you if the volcanoes, like, if obviously, you know, you can do that like in the surrounding area of like the volcano, but when you go further out, and let's say that you go to the other side of the planet and you look at the geological layers around the same time, you go back to see, you know, and you know, right about that time, would you be able to see signatures of volcanic activity if there was massive amounts of ash in the atmosphere and stuff? I know that you can, and you're probably going to get into this, so you're going to hate me for bringing this up early, but I know you can
you go for
tell that, you know, that there's like iridium that is, iridium's not generally found on Earth, but it is in like outer space and like, you know,
so
asteroids and stuff.
Yeah, so the fact that there's a lot of iridium found in the surface at that point actually does favour, well, I wouldn't say favour, but it does work perfectly fine with this hypothesis, because it's found deep down in the earth where volcanoes essentially come from. It's just not found on the surface. So if there was a massive amount of volcanic activity, it does stand to reason that a lot of it would get thrown up, especially if it was made in such a quick way as the evidence is showing. So that actually does work with the fact that this hypothesis, it does work with it, because I was thinking the same as you. I thought, well, that surely only favors the meteor, but asteroid, but that's evidently not the case. But so there's the first thing. There is a high level of iridium. It's very rare. It's not found on the Earth's surface, but it is found. It is found on asteroids, but it's also found inside the Earth. So either of those could be what caused it, or there might be other options. To go back to what you were saying, or both, exactly. And then to go back to what Rachel was saying, when geologists look at basically the foundations of the Deacon Traps, they have very clear indications that there's volcanic rock all over the place, that at the time it probably covered 200,000 square miles, and that certain areas had lava as deep as 6,500 feet, which is just incredible.
That alone would have wiped out like so many habitats.
Yeah,
like just the lava.
And something that hot, that big in one area, it will affect the entire world. There's just no two ways about it. So the fact that there's substantial evidence that did emerge then, and there's all of this geological data showing that it was as ferocious as it seems, does seem to say that this is a strong hypothesis to contend with. And another element is fractured crystals. Do you guys know what they are? No,
I don't think so.
I hadn't a clue either, but they're known as shocked quartz. That's another word for them. But the important thing about them is that scientists know that their creation requires immense impact. It requires a hell of a lot of force in order to make them, essentially. And the decontraps theory suggests that this impact was caused by, again, large-scale volcanic activity, that would be able to produce these fractured crystals. So there you've got 3 lines of evidence already that's favouring it, or again, not favouring it, but certainly does work with it. And then, of course, there's the fossil record. So when I was at school, from what I remember, I should say, I remember being told that we know that the extinction was a asteroid because when the asteroid hit, basically the extinction was very, very quick. Don't know if you guys had the same perception there.
I'm going back a few years now, but when I was in year 7, I won a science competition to make a poster on what killed the dinosaurs, and basically I came to a conclusion that it could be one of a number of things. And it won. So we were never told that it was specifically one thing. We were told that, there are different options and we have some idea, but we can't know for sure right now.
Yeah, that's essentially what this is. When we go to go to a crime scene, if the evidence is very strong and it favors one story, we can basically say we can sincerely infer that this is the case.
Yeah.
But in some cases, it's like we don't really know. It could be 2 or 3 options. That's kind of what's going on here. There's too many things. There's several. The volcanism hypothesis is strong, it seems. But wait till we get to the asteroid. But the fossil record shows that there was an enormous amount of extinction immediately, but then there was quite a delayed period where there was a hell of a lot of extinction following afterwards. So we're looking thousands and thousands of years after an asteroid.
And surely that would fit with the volcanoes.
It does. It fits with volcanoes very, very well. It doesn't quite so much fit with asteroid, but then again it does, which we'll tap into in a second. But again, there's just multiple reasons to think that this, at the very least, had a big role to play. So,
I was gonna say one thing on that is when we think of volcanoes, usually we think of kind of in terms of these very isolated, localized events. So we'll look at Hawaii and what's been going on, in the last couple months, and we'll see, kind of a little lava oozing out, maybe a little dust cloud going in, and the biggest thing that we can think of is like, oh, Mount St. Helens or something, or some recent volcano that happened. But that's just not, that's thinking very small in terms of volcanic possibilities, because there are, right now on Earth, I think there's like 10 or so or more super volcanoes that could go off at any time, and about every 100,000 years. It might be more, it might be significantly more than that, but that could go off at any time. And when we look back at the largest volcanoes that that have occurred, there's one that like Mount Vesuvius happened in like 1886, and that's kind of like the biggest one in like our current conceptualization of this. And that, like, basically you could see soot like halfway around the world. Like the sky was getting dark, and it was affecting the atmosphere and affecting plants and climate and everything. And that's Vesuvius was only level 5 on the volcanic explosivity index, whereas it goes all the way up to level 8. And so like there was one, I think the most recent level 8 was, this says 25,000 years ago. And when you have something like that, it's so massive that like all the ash in the air literally blots out the sun, kills massive amounts of plant and animal life, usually results long-term in like cooling effects that, will cause like lead to an ice age and stuff like that. So you're not just looking at one kind of, the sky's dark and then it's all just kind of going to dissipate and you're going to get back to normal in a couple days. This is long-term effects.
It's a really good point to make, actually, that it is easy to just assume it's a mountain with a bit of lava dribbling down it. It's serious business, and it does. We know for certain that it causes real significant damage, as you've just rightfully pointed out. The decontraps were some of the biggest volcanoes at the time. I think they still are today as well, and there were several of them, and we know from the evidence, just from the geological data, that they were going off like an AK-47. So it's So we can absolutely infer from there that a lot of damage would have been caused.
Just a quick correction. This, according to BBC, there's 20 known supervolcanoes on Earth, approximately.
20. Oh, very nice. Yeah. No, very nice. So moving on, one of the other hypotheses that was offered is that the dinosaurs and the extinction basically happened due to competition. Simply competition. Now, on the surface, this seems absolutely ridiculous, but as we were saying earlier on, there's going to be an enormous amount of extinction caused by the presence of humans outcompeting other things. And when people look and find this, or whatever, I say people, beings, should they be here, if they was to look and find that sedimentary layer, the Holocene, they might also realize that there's an enormous amount of CO2 emissions because of the Industrial Revolution, and conclude that that must have had something to do with it, when it kind of did indirectly, but really it was just humans walked in there and outcompeted them. So that's another one that's offered. What do you guys personally think to that? Do you think that's plausible, possible, probable?
I feel like it's possible, but this is kind of like making me feel how like it's probably not an either or, it's probably a little bit of all of them. Yeah. Like if you assume that, you know, the volcanoes killed a load of plants, that would have meant less food, which means more competition for the plants that there are, for the plant-eating dinosaurs, and therefore more of them die, and then less food for the meat-eating ones, and so on. So I can see how one bad thing happening can cause the others as well. So I think it's definitely plausible, but maybe not as an isolated thing.
Yeah. I think I'm with you there. The grand narrative that you were just describing is pretty much where I've concluded as well, that all of these, including the asteroid, which I'm about to mention, they all played a part, because there's enough evidence to indicate, and there's enough reason to indicate, that they absolutely would function in some way to have caused this mass extinction. It's never really one thing. We like to think in black and white, but it's not. But however, there may be something. Maybe the asteroid did just straight up cause this catalyst, and then what we're describing now is just the effects. Maybe the asteroid hit, and because it hit so hard, it caused turbulence in the Earth. That caused the volcanoes and the Deacon traps to rise, and then hey presto, you've got an apocalypse going on immediately. So all coming together, as it were. But as far as the competition thing, there's also, of course, the fact that there's lots of animals that died off very slowly, lots of species, I should say, that died off very slowly, and that would favor competition more so than being wiped out pretty much immediately from an asteroid.
Yeah.
So finally, we get to the asteroid theory, which we've pretty much discussed. And
this one I'm a little bit confused by, because it is literally probably 12, 13 years since I've read any amount of stuff on this. What is the actual theory in terms of how it actually killed them? That's not a silly question.
No, it's good. So in short, the theory, known as the asteroid impact theory, proposes that a giant asteroid collided with Earth, and in doing so caused an immense catalysm. That in addition to causing massive local damage, it caused thick, dense clouds, similar to the volcano, of dust to permeate the atmosphere, which would have blocked out the sun's rays for months, effectively killing most plants. And more importantly, it would have resulted in a massive increase in temperature due to a massive release of greenhouse gases. That's basically it. That's it in a nutshell. And there is a hell of a lot of evidence in its favor, to the point that most scientists have fully concluded that is what happened. Like, we know that hit, and these things I just said did happen, and that they played a vital part in establishing some of the other sources of evidence that I've referenced.
I think too, a lot of people don't necessarily grasp the scale of when an asteroid comes, and hits Earth.
Yeah.
If it's just the size of a baseball or something, it's just going to get, burned up in our atmosphere. But when you have something that comes in that's, the size of a bus, it's, going to come in with, significantly more energy. But then you have something the size of like New York City coming in and smashing into Earth. And all of a sudden you have, something that's capable of, wiping out, most of life as we know it, because the scale of the amount of energy that that it results from something like this just plowing into Earth, you're looking at speeds of tens of thousands of miles per hour just flying through space and just plummeting into Earth. And it's not only coming at a quick speed, but it's building up heat as it enters our atmosphere. So it's hitting with these temperatures that are just off the scales. And then when it plummets into the side of the Earth, it's stirring up all this dust and debris and stuff, and it's just billowing outward in clouds that can cover the entire Earth. You're looking at a sterilizing, life sterilizing event. It's not just a little meteor or something.
Well, the size of the meteor that they found in the peninsula, I don't know how to pronounce this one. I don't want to get this one wrong. Is it the Yucatan?
Yucatan.
Yucatan. See, when it comes to names, they can be pronounced in any way, and I've just demonstrated my ignorance again. I do apologize. But yeah, it's a 150 kilometer wide crater, which is huge. And
so we actually found the crater.
Yeah, we found the crater.
But not the asteroid itself? Like, what would have happened to that? Would it have just broken up, or...?
Yeah, there's loads of the asteroid as well. And there's loads of... I mean, we say the asteroid, there's loads of what... Thomas was saying about iridium. It would make sense that there's lots there, and there's specifically more where the crater is, and that is the case. So it's a big indication. Yeah, it's pretty clever. But physicists...
it'd be like throwing a mud clod at someone. Part of it's going to be left on them, but part of it's going to be scattered all over the place.
Absolutely everywhere, exactly. But they've calculated that in order to create the impact that it did, it would have been... let me just get this right. 10 kilometers wide, which is huge. And it must have been traveling at 30 kilometers per second.
That's terrifying.
Like that is a city, a big city, moving at just speeds you cannot fathom. Like as soon as you could see it in the air, it would hit the ground at the size of a massive city, and just the destruction on that would be like nothing you have ever seen. So just to put that speed in context, that's 150 times faster than a jet airliner. It's just...
That's terrifying.
Yeah. But the best thing about this theory is that, if you're looking at a dead body and you're trying to find what killed them, and you find a knife wound and it's in a critical place, you've got a good idea that didn't help. And this is the knife wound in the body of Earth, dated back to that time, showing that it is very likely the catalyst. So can you think of any other lines of evidence that would support it? So we've said about rare metals and iridium. And we have said about just the fact that you can date the impact zone and that you can find more of the iridium in that one area. Can you think of any others?
More evidence that it was an asteroid?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that the iridium wouldn't just be localized, it'd be global. You'd find
it is. Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely everywhere.
Right at the barrier of, like, you see all these species in the fossil layer, and then all of a sudden there's just this layer of iridium, and there's nothing, or half of them are wiped out after that.
Yep, pretty much. Other sources that they've got melted rock, which I believe is the right term, but they found once molten rock called ejecta, and they found it in a trajectory from that site, which means that it's very likely indicating that there was an explosion of some sort.
Stupid question. How is that different from like magma or lava as when it reaches the surface?
I think it's similar to fractured crystals in the sense that it requires a truly immense amount of power and impact and pressure to have these sediments, these minerals form. And so basically the lava, the volcanic theory on its own would say that no, this was all created by the churning underneath and the very fast bringing it to the surface, whereas the asteroid would say no, it was created by a literal massive impact that would have just immediately caused X, Y, and Z. And of course, as we were saying, the fossil record shows it as well. There is an absolutely immense amount of death in the boundary, just as all of the other extinctions. It really is very obvious when you know what you're looking at that something very bad happened at that point. Yeah. So I was going to move on and say, so what killed the dinosaurs? But I think it seems that we're all on board that it probably was a mixture of all of this, but the
Yeah.
asteroid seems to be the main thing.
How do we know that it wasn't something like a big infection that killed off loads of people?
So
Animals.
yeah, no. So I think the thing is that you have all these lines of evidence which shows very peculiar abnormalities in the environment of the Earth at that time, and all of them seem to be very much indicating that there was big catastrophic effects happening. If they were absent and there was a mass extinction, then we would be really having to look at this again, and that's where we might say maybe there was a disease or something like that, and can we find evidence for it? I think it would be involved, things like that, because there was just a hell of a lot of change going on. But I don't think it could have been the main thing personally.
Okay, no, that's fair. Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the last thing I want to discuss before wrapping up and saying what the next episode is going to be, if we know it, and saying that we don't have a tagline, because that's true, and that's now our tagline, is I basically want to talk about the sixth mass extinction, which is, again, the Holocene extinction. What do you guys think to the idea that we right now are causing an extinction, as in we collectively as humans?
I think it's not just an idea, it's a fact. We can look at the extinction rates, the normal extinction rates of animals versus the current extinction rates. And where, animals are dying off at a rate 100 or 1,000 times more, depending on, the type of animal, as you normally would expect to see in the wild. And people don't realize the scales of human activity, of deforestation, of desertification, of all these different things, that we're changing ecosystems, we're changing environments. Sometimes it's because we'll bring a new predator and introduce it into a new environment and it kills off all the local animals quickly. Sometimes it's because we destroy an animal's habitat and there's nowhere else for it to go. But
I was just gonna ask, when you say we're in we're causing an extinction or whatever, does that include our activities like causing pollution and all that sort of thing, and also things that could kill off us as people, like superbugs and stuff?
The sad story that might be down the line is that the hype about CO2 emissions is correct completely, and we can't do anything about it, and it does end up wiping out just about everything, because it would cause the temperature to go absolutely insanely hot, perhaps the hottest we've ever experienced. And if life does come back, because there's no guarantee that it would, Earth could become a Mars state planet at that point. If life does come back and then they do dig up and they do look at the boundary, the Heliocene boundary, as I guess it would be called, or the humans a dick boundary, it worries me to think that an extinction caused by CO2 emissions of that level, or by whatever it might be, we could just be able to beat that 95% mark. But there's a lot of people which would say, don't be stupid, humans would never have the capacity to cause such havoc, we're tiny. But I don't personally see that that's a thing.
Can I just say, most people that I talk to that have that mindset are extremely under-traveled. Because when they'll sit at home and they'll watch these nature documentaries by Planet Earth, and to them it's most of the planet is just this pristine, isolated, not touched by humans, massive, nature, natural world. That just is not the case anymore. In order to get those shots, they have to travel to the most obscure areas, and sometimes they have to go at times a day when people aren't there. They'll go to the most remote jungles, and even then there's people and stuff in different areas and different tribes and stuff. And every time that I have, every single place on Earth that I have gone to, even if I'm hiking in remote mountains, you almost always encounter some type of other people. And most places, if I go to Vietnam and I'm in Ho Chi Minh City and there's just pollution that is thick in the air and there's millions of people. You go to, parts of China and there's just millions, tens of millions of people in these areas. And you start to realize just how ubiquitous the human population is, even on islands. I'll go to these remote islands and there's people and there's trash and there's litter and there's pollution and stuff. And we don't realize how widespread our reach is on this planet. There's over 7 billion people on planet Earth, and they are inhabiting literally every single corner.
And
even parts of Antarctica, we have permanent, establishments set up.
That's a really good point you raise about traveling as well. So I'm not well traveled, and so now I think about it, I do fall for that illusion of watching Blue Planet and thinking this is what most of the world is like. But of course, I won't anymore. You've enlightened me to that. But another fact is, you were saying like 7 billion humans. People eat like, I think it's something like 80 billion pigs a year. It's either pigs or chicken. But I mean,
that's not counting cows and all the other animals that we eat too.
But this is the thing, if you look at CO2 emissions, if you look at climate change, if you want to prevent climate change, you have to stop eating meat. There's no two ways about it. I don't mean to get preachy on you, but there really is no two ways about it. Like, you got to sort that out. But when you add that in, it's like the idea that humans aren't changing the environment.
The methane from cow farts.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's a hell of a lot. Yeah, there is from that.
Yeah.
There's deforestation as well to build like ranches and farms and things like that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Issue.
There's some interesting things that I don't unfortunately have the references on me, but when humans enter an environment, the drop off other mammals in that environment is sincerely significant, and it drops over a period of 40 years. And they've got this down with America, with basically anywhere humans go, that happens almost immediately, and that's just mammals. It's crazy to think, but yeah, that competition theory is looking a little bit more possible now. But this is the thing. Let's just say that the CO2 emissions are wrong, and there wasn't any kind of catalyst. If someone was to look at all of the extinction that's happening now, and let's assume that we don't turf up the ground too much, and there is actually evidence of it, it would be very hard for them to pinpoint it, because but then again, would it? Because if we're smart enough to figure out that it's very likely that this extinction was caused by X and Y and Z, then I'm sure they could do the same.
Can I add real quick though that it's not just CO2 levels in the atmosphere that we're worried about.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the greenhouse gases that we're emitting into the atmosphere are being absorbed by the oceans, and we're seeing a massive rise in acidification in the oceans. And once you hit a pH level, I think it's 7.8 or something. I have to look up the exact number, but we're getting close to reaching that. If you if you extrapolate out the current rate that increases in acidity, we're getting close to reaching it by the end of the century. And at that point, basically anything with a calcium-based shell, is going to be screwed in the ocean. There's nowhere for it to go. We're looking at all the coral reefs just disappearing, and that's a massive habitat for ocean-dwelling animals. And a lot of these animals, we use as food sources. Other animals use as food sources. It really is that our entire ecosystem, our entire environment is. I say ecosystem, I mean a global ecosystem. It's so interconnected, and you affect one thing, you affect everything else. You set off a domino effect, a chain reaction. And the biggest concern is, are we going to hit a point where there's a positive feedback loop, and one thing causes another thing to speed up, which causes another thing to speed up, and then we're at a point of no return.
Yeah.
So it really is something we should be concerned about.
Yeah, despite, saying X, let's say that X isn't true and Y isn't true, I'm completely on board with you. It's a serious threat, and we unfortunately are not taking it so seriously.
Yeah. Sorry, back to my episode about antibiotic resistance as well, with all the kind of, mutations in viruses and bacteria and fungi that we've been seeing. It's not just affecting humans anymore, but like we spoke about in that episode, it's affecting cattle and other animals that we eat as well. It could very soon start to affect other apes and monkeys, and then spread from there. And soon, these are pretty potent bugs that could wipe out a big chunk of, living things.
So are you saying that maybe the dinosaurs just overused antibiotics, yeah?
I think so, yeah. That sounds about right. Those damn dinosaur doctors.
Yeah.
Always over prescribing.
Those gigantic Tyrannosaurus chickens.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what it was, though, right?
Paging
It's like,
Dr. Rex.
yeah, the T-Rexes, they just had short arms. They didn't want to get, like, you know, doing all the tests and stuff, so they're just, just write out another prescription, you know? Like,
Yeah.
them and their short arms. Let's blame them.
No,
Did
for
it
sure.
themselves.
Well, on that note, we have covered everything that I have down, and I think we've done a fairly good job, but we'll leave it to the discretion of the audience to say whether or not that was the case. Next week, we have Thomas Westbrook, of course. Do you know what you're coming in with?
I will be talking about can we live forever? And should we? Can we cheat death?
Ooh, I like that topic.
That will be good. Yeah.
Can I just say real quick to everyone who's listening who's concerned about climate change and concerned about the sixth mass extinction, you know, a lot of times that we have this tendency to kind of sit back and be like, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. And I want to say there is. Like, there's so many people around the world that are investing in different types of clean renewable energy, whether that's through, you know, solar power or wind or nuclear energy, which we should do a whole episode on. But there's also there's systems that will use waves, like ocean currents and waves, to generate clean energy. There's types of using algae as a form of clean energy. And not just clean energy, there's people going through and cleaning up the oceans, and there's carbon sequestration methods where they pull carbon from the atmosphere. And there's engineers who are even just hackers and, you know, people part of the maker movement who are coming up with new solutions and alternatives to stuff. So you can be a part of that. Go change the world, make it better.
Yeah, that's unfortunately one of the only areas where I think conspiracy theories happen all the time, but there's strong cases of there's really good reason why fuel companies, etc., do not want electrical companies to get any kind of foot onto anything serious. But yeah. So on that note, we don't have a tagline.
No. I think, though, ahead of next week's episode, if people are watching this on YouTube, they should leave a comment telling us what they would do if they could live forever. For me, I would just make sure I read all the books in the world. Oh, I would love that.
Wow.
That's my dream.
Give us your feedback and we'll mention them in our show.
This has been an absolute blast, and now we want you to join in the conversation over on the Here and How Facebook and Twitter pages, or follow us on Pinterest and Instagram if you just want some of the dankest of sciencey memes. If you like one of our particular styles, check out each of our YouTube channels: Rachel Oates, Rationality Rules by Stephen Woodford, and Holy Kool-Aid by me, Thomas Westbrook. To find all of our episodes, show notes, contact information, and more, warp on over to our home base, thehereandhow.com. If you enjoyed this episode and want us to succeed in spreading the love of science, you can help us out by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. And to all our friends and family listening, thank you for spending this episode with us. We'll be back to explore another exciting big idea next week. Now go create something magnificent.